All right, so here is the last section of this chapter that looks at basically the different types of nonverbal communication, and then more specifically what meanings are communicated through the different types of nonverbals that we use. Okay, so the first one, the big one, is body movement. And there's a study called kinesics, which is how people communicate through body movement. If you're interested in becoming a physical therapist or a trainer or working with people in the human body, you would study, I always say it wrong, kinesiology. Okay, never mind. Okay, so we'll look first at a very specific part of the body, which is the face and eyes. I think this is fascinating. So they said researchers have found there are at least 8 distinguishable positions of the eyebrows and forehead, 8 of the eyes and eyelids, and 10 for the lower face. So I'm not positive that you can actually do the combination of all of them, but if you could, that would be 640 different movements that you would have to interpret. So you can see that, I mean, even if there's not 640, there's a lot going on. So it is very complicated to interpret what is happening. But also very interesting, they've done something called a still face experiment, where they ask mothers to as much as they can show no expression, no emotion on their face when the children are trying to talk to them. We're talking babies, we're talking infants, and sometimes they don't. They try to keep their face blank, and other times they look at their phones, and the children are absolutely unhappy with that. Okay. There's a specific branch of the face that studies eye movement, or how the eyes communicate, and that's called oculesics, right? So in the United States, looking at someone indicates that you are interested in what they have to say, or in them, or you like them, which is why parents will frequently say to children, look at me when I'm talking to you. In a job interview, look them firmly squarely in the eyes and shake hands. Okay. Again, in this culture, if we make eye contact with someone, that makes the other person like us more, because then that person feels that they've been seen. Okay. Now, this is something that is definitely very much influenced by culture. There are cultures where it is rude for someone younger to look in the eyes of someone older. So, it's important to be very aware of the culture that you're in when you're figuring out how much eye contact is expected. What's the other word I'm thinking of? Is it valued? Students have told me that this is one of the most difficult things for them, this idea of eye contact. And honestly, I really believe if you're spending a lot of time looking at a computer screen, then obviously eye contact is going to be harder. And I think the only way to become less bothered by, less unsure of eye contact, is to put down the phone and actually look at people. Start small and build up. Okay, another part of body movement, much larger, looks at posture and at gestures. If you watched the Amy Cuddy video, you can answer the question, how is posture linked with emotional states? If you're feeling tired, what's going on with your posture? If you're feeling really good, what's going on with your posture? So what if you're tired, and instead of having that slumped posture, you were to stand up straight and take a more of a powerful pose? Do you think that would do you agree with what Amy Cuddy said, that it's going to impact your emotions? Okay, in fact, as the textbook says, we use a lot of expressions in English that have to do with posture, right? Another one has to do with gestures, and gestures can be intentional and they can be unconscious. This is something else that Amy Cuddy says in her video, where and the textbook references this. People who have been blind since birth still use certain gestures. She talks about, she showed a picture of Usain Bolt, who as he won a race, he has his hands up and out in the, I'm doing it right now as I'm saying this, in the V for victory. And she said, even people who've been blind since birth will do this. So there's possibly a genetic component to this. Okay. If we use gestures well, that can increase persuasiveness. If you increase your hand movements, if you lean forward, if you are trying, keeping your body, your posture open, people will think, wow, really open, you will be more persuasive. I think this is fascinating that there are in the human body something called mirror neurons, and basically human beings tend to imitate or mirror what other people are doing, and when one person mirrors another, it increases, what do they say, persuasiveness increases when one person mirrors another's movements. Okay, because basically what you're saying to that person is, I am like you. And when you say, oh, this person is like me, you will find their message more persuasive. Now, I don't tell you this to ask that you use mirroring for nefarious purposes, but just realize that if you're listening to someone and they're speaking and you're like, wow, they're really saying good stuff. I believe them. Would be interesting to see if you realize that they are somehow mirroring what you're doing. Okay. Context is very important. So I tend, how it said that women are more non-verbally expressive, but they don't make as large gestures as men do. I think I make fairly expansive gestures. And it's acceptable in the classroom. But I found if I'm in a more formal setting, like when we've had a faculty meeting and I'm making my larger gestures, it doesn't go over as well. And that in a more formal context, it's better for me to be a little bit more restrained. Okay, and you probably figure out the same thing. The second kind of nonverbal that we're going to look at is touch. There's a whole branch of the social science called haptics. It's the study of touch. And they talk about how important touch is for infants. They've done study with premature babies, and if the parents, usually the moms, but not uniquely, if they can spend time with them and touch them, their development is better. And it's not just in the short term, it actually is longer term. But it's also not just for babies. Even adults find touch to be a good stress reliever. Just a hug, a hand on the back, I don't know, kind of a rubbing someone's head. A lot of psychologists were worried because during the pandemic, when we didn't have as much social interactions, they said people are going to be, they're going to be starved for this physical contact. And so the number of pet adoptions went way up because people just needed something that they could touch. And, my cat likes to lick me. And while that's annoying, it's also kind of sweet. Okay. The textbook says something, and I can't 100% agree with this, and I want to know your opinion too. They say that touch can be very useful for jobs. For example, if a wait staff or a server lightly touches the patron's hand or forearm, that's from, between the elbow and the wrist, it can result in a larger tip. And if as the server is suggesting, our special today is, or I would suggest the sea bass, and they're touching the patron on the forearm lightly, not grabbing them, that they are more likely to choose that meal. I always joke, I'm from Connecticut. We don't do that. So I'd like to talk about this in class. What do you think about it? And if you've been in other parts of the country or in other countries, have you noticed a difference? Okay. The third one, which people tend not to think of, is using the voice. And that's para-language. Para meaning alongside. So it's not the words themselves. It's how fast you're speaking, the rate, the tempo, which words are you emphasizing, I got these out of order, the pitch, in a higher voice or a lower voice, the tone, are you being sarcastic, are you being sweet, are you being mean, and the volume, how loud you're speaking. That can completely change the message. This version of the textbook does not talk about it, but the previous edition of the textbook mentioned how accent can have an impact on how we feel about a person, that there are accents that are considered status, and there are accents that are considered not, where we would think someone has a lower status. Like in the United States, for the most part, we think a British accent is sexy or intelligent or charming. In the Northeast, we tend not to like a Southern accent. So it's important to realize that if you have these biases for or against an accent, that it might be a good idea to take a look at it and say, what exactly am I reacting to here? Sarcasm is a example of a nonverbal. The problem, I love sarcasm. It's one of my go-tos. The problem with sarcasm is it's not easily understood by younger people. I think they say people under the age of 8 don't necessarily understand sarcasm. Okay. And then there are people like my husband who absolutely detest sarcasm, and so that causes relationship problems there. Another part of the voice is pauses. We can have, I should have had a colon there instead of a comma. There are unintentional pauses where you pause, maybe because you lost your train of thought or because you're trying to figure out how to react to something, and you might mean it one way and the person who's with you interprets it a different way. There's also, it's called a vocalized pause or a disfluency. I notice this a lot in public speaking. When you don't really know what to say, do you say like, or do you have some other kind of a filler? Okay. The last point on this is the idea of shared vocal patterns or convergence, where if you speak the same way as someone else, you feel more connected to them. What do they say? I guess the Kardashians and Bachelorette contestants, in my day, it was called Valley Girl Speak, where a statement ends up sounding like a question. So yesterday I went to the mall. There was a sale at, where would someone go? And there was a sale at the Gap. So why are you asking a question? That's up talk. And either when you say that and you hear other people who say that, you like them more, or if you like someone, you would tend to copy their vocal pattern. Okay, So communicators pick up vocal mannerisms to affiliate with their speech community. Okay, righty. 4, this is to me fascinating, distance, proxemics. How communication is affected by the use of space, the organization of space, and the perception of space and distance. So everyone has their own bubble of personal space. I've put up a funny, it's probably about 3-4 minutes, a clip from a Seinfeld video, a clip from Seinfeld, and it's someone who's a close talker, and see how people react. So Edward T. Hall did this work in the 60s, I think the late 60s. This applies to Americans. I do not know, although I'm sure other studies have been done in other cultures. I'm just not aware of them. And he's come up with his theory of proximal zones. And basically he talks about these 4 distances. Intimate distance, people with whom you have an intimate relation. And intimate does not mean sexual, because a mother and child would have an intimate relationship. So that's where skin to skin is okay. Up to 18 inches. So if there's someone that you don't know very well and they come closer to you than 18 inches, you are going to feel that they have somehow, they've violated your personal space. Okay. Personal distance tends to be with people who are we're friendly with. And that's, 18 inches is as close as we go, up to 4 feet. Beyond 4 feet, you might say to someone, wait, hey, I showered today. You can get closer. Why are you standing so far away? Social distance is when again, things have changed because of the pandemic, but generally out in public, we're okay standing about, 4 feet away from somebody, maybe up to 12 feet away. Beyond 12 feet, it's a little weird. Public distance is, in a more traditional classroom, more or less the distance between where I would stand at the front of the room and where you would sit would be approximately 12 feet. When it's further away than that, there's, it's you need a microphone. People start to feel that there's too much of a distance there. So we're gonna work on this a little bit in class, and I think I'm gonna violate people's personal distance a little bit, and we're just gonna see. This is the theory. You might find that you are a little bit different just because of your cultural background, because of how you were raised. But distance is a really interesting thing to take a look at. One year I had a woman who did her essay. She decided to do the experiment, and she went to Blueback Square, and she would see people sitting on a bench who obviously, and there would be, person, space, person, and she would sit down in between them to violate their personal space. I don't think that would work these days because of COVID, but it's an interesting experiment. Territoriality means the space that we consider is ours. If you've ever gone into a classroom and you have you sit in the 3rd row, second from the front of the room, and you walk in and someone is sitting in your space. It's not your chair, but you do feel that it is your space. And so, how does that feel? How do we respond to that? Okay. Also think about when you were younger, your parents would probably just walk into your room. At what point was that no longer acceptable as far as you were concerned? Okay, so that's territoriality. Number 6 is another interesting one, time or chronemics, the study of how humans use time and structure time. And we talk about cultures being monochronic and polychronic. So the United States is monochronic. If we say the meeting's going to start at 9, it starts at 9. Other countries are polychronic, where this is what I found when I lived in Niger, and we would say the meeting was going to start at 3. And so, of course, I was there at 2:45 or 2:50 to be ready for when the meeting started at 3. And people would drift in a little bit before 3, a little bit after 3, maybe even up to 3:20. I guess the time that they followed was ish, 3-ish. Okay. I thought that was rude for them not to respect somebody else's time, and they thought I was too uptight. So the use of time is definitely culturally based. Yet, even within a culture, the rules of time can vary. In your classes, do you find that there are some professors who start on time and end on time? I know I have a colleague, her class starts at 11:30 and she leaves her office at 11:30. And that drives me nuts because class is supposed to start at 11:30, and if you're not in the classroom, how can it start? So, okay. If let's say the CEO of Tunxus wants to meet with me, and he says we're going to meet at 11. Well, I would make sure I was there a couple minutes before 11, because it would be rude of me to make him wait. However, because he has a higher status, if I get there and I'm sitting there and then his administrative assistant says, "Oh, he's delayed, but he'll be with you in about 10 minutes." I mean, I might not like it, but it's in a sense culturally acceptable for him to make me wait. Okay. What about time and the issue of mediated messages? You know, when somebody texts you, especially, or emails you, how much time, what's an acceptable amount of time to wait before you respond? And I thought this was really interesting, that said students who got speedy email responses from instructors rated those teachers more competent and caring, regardless of the content of the message. So, I mean, I guess I could have a bunch of typos in my message, but if I respond promptly, you're going to think that I'm a better teacher in some ways. That's cool. Okay. The last one, there's 2 more. The book next talks about physical attractiveness. There are definitely benefits to attractiveness and also downside of attractiveness. The idea of what is attractive is definitely culturally determined. In Niger, where my husband's from, to have that gap between the 2 front teeth, the upper front teeth, is considered very sexy. Not so much in the United States. You know, you have to have perfect teeth really to be considered sexy. Interesting. I like this. This is from The Dark Side of Communication. A woman who is above average in looks can gain an 8% wage bonus. Okay, so she's good looking. She'll make 8% more than someone who isn't. If they're not very good, let's say we have there's a standard for what's attractive. Not good looking, she'll make 4% less. Men, on the other hand, if they're attractive, their wage bonus is 4%. But if they're below average, the penalty is 13%. Okay, so that's called lookism, that we are judging people on their physical attractiveness. Maybe the upside of this is, while that is important at the very beginning, we talk about this in chapter 9, chapter 10, I believe. There are things that we can, if we are not especially attractive, there are things that we can do to make ourselves appear more attractive, and that we'll talk about, like how you dress and makeup and all that. But it's also, after you get to know someone, you're much more likely to rate them as attractive if they have a nice personality, which sounds terrible, but as we get to know people, how they look is less important. Okay. Clothing. We look at someone, we look at how they're dressed, and we make assumptions about all these things. Economic level, education level, trustworthiness, level of success, moral character, all based on what they're wearing. Doesn't that seem a little crazy to you? But this is I think subconsciously or unconsciously we are doing this. We know that what you wear says something about you. That's why we tell people that there's a certain way to dress for an interview. I remember many years ago, when I was first hired full-time at Tunxus, I worked in the admissions office, and I taught a class on Friday evenings. Well, Friday was dress down day in the office, and so I was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans and sneakers, and for some reason my mother stopped at the college to drop something off, and she saw me and she said in utter horror, "You are not wearing that to teach." I wasn't, but I think she would probably still be, well, maybe horrified is too strong a word. She would not think it was a good idea that I wear Vans in the classroom because I'm a professor and I should dress. I think she always wore a suit or a dress or like dress trousers when she taught. So, okay. As you are realizing how you react to people based on their clothing, beware of cultural perceptions. There's that great cartoon of the American woman or European woman looking at the woman in a hijab thinking how terrible this is, that she is part of a male-dominated culture, and the woman in the hijab is looking at this woman in a bathing suit thinking how terrible it is that she's in a male-dominated culture. Okay. The textbook does not talk about physical environment. This is kind of covered when we talked about that we influence. Hold on, managing impressions, and one of the way that we manage impressions is through setting. But I think this is bigger. The environment can shape our interactions. I have long been unhappy with college classrooms. I don't like the fact that the walls are kind of an off-white and the carpet is gray and the chairs are not comfortable and they're set up in rows. And, I had an old supervisor, a former supervisor, who used to stick her head in the classroom and say, "Put them in a circle," because she felt that if we were sitting in a circle, that would promote a better interaction, that if we were sitting in rows, the focus was always on me. And I get that. So I would ask you, can you think about ways that we, maybe low cost or no cost, or ways that we could redo the classrooms so that you would feel happy to be in the classroom and you would interact with people more? Okay. If you ever noticed when you go to like a hospital or a doctor's office, frequently if you go into the pediatrics, the colors are brighter. They have giraffes and lions, and there's a lot more fun stuff going on. Why don't they have that for the adults? Okay, let's check your understanding. Can you tell me what are the 7 or 8 types of nonverbal communication? And can you give an example of each one and how it impacts communication? And is there one that you think is really interesting that you'd like to explore in the essay? And we can talk about that when we are in the classroom. So let me X out of this one.